The playlist that wouldn't stay a playlist. Part 1 of 3. On building a machine that listens. It started, as most things that matter start, with a feeling I couldn't name and a playlist I couldn't stop feeding. 2 a.m, the house doing that thing that houses do when everyone else is asleep, becoming a different country, a place with its own customs, its own physics, where the refrigerator hum is a kind of national anthem and the light from your screen is the only border crossing for miles. I had been adding songs to an Apple Music playlist called Lord of Vibes for the better part of a year. The way some people feed stray cats, compulsively, without strategy, knowing full well that what began as generosity was becoming obligation. The playlist was almost at 1,000 tracks, and 1,000 tracks is a problem disguised as a collection. But the problem had a shape, and the shape was this. There exists a kind of music that belongs to the hours between 2 and 6 a.m, and no one is curating it properly. And by no one, I mean no one who hears it the way I hear it. Not as background, not as ambience, not as the thing you put on to help you sleep, but as the soundtrack to the particular quality of consciousness that only emerges when the social contract dissolves and you are finally, blessedly, left alone with the hum. Burial understood this. The whole first side of Untrue is a map of this territory. Rain-soaked London at 4 a.m. Garage rhythms ghosted to the point of memory. Vocal samples chopped until they say nothing and mean everything. 2814 understood it from the other direction, the Tokyo direction, where neon bleeds through fog and nostalgia is not for the past, but for futures that never arrived. Pearl understood it from underwater, from inside the pressure chamber of dub techno, where the kick drum is more felt than heard, and the reverb tail is the real composition. I had been collecting these people, these sounds, these 3 a.m. whispers from strangers who happen to share my particular frequency of insomnia. And the collection had become unwieldy the way all collections become unwieldy, which is to say, it had become a mirror. 1,000 tracks is a self-portrait painted in other people's frequencies. The question that kept me up, which is to say, kept me up later than the music was already keeping me up, was this. What if the playlist could become something else? Not a list of songs, but a journey through them. Not a library, but a landscape. A composition where the tracks were instruments and the mix was the piece, and the 2 hours were a single unbroken thought. The way the hours between 2 and 6 are a single unbroken thought, if you let them be. I had been DJing for years. I knew what this sounded like when a human did it. The long blend where 2 worlds overlap and neither knows the other is there. The moment the new kick finds the old groove and they walk together for 16 bars before parting. The filter sweep that swallows the room and gives it back changed. I knew the craft. What I did not have was the time, or more honestly, the particular species of patience required to do it again and again, weekly, at the quality that the music deserved, without burning out and abandoning the whole thing by month 3. So I asked a machine to help. And I need to slow down here because this is where the story people expect diverges from the story that actually happened, and the divergence matters. People hear, I asked AI to make my DJ mixes, and they picture one of 2 things. A man too comfortable to do the work, outsourcing his art to a calculator. Or a button pressed, a masterpiece produced. The future arrived and wrapped in plastic. What actually happened is closer to what happens when you hire a contractor to build a house you designed. You still drew the plans. You still chose the wood, the windows, the way the kitchen faces east, because you know in your body, the way you know which key unlocks the back door. That morning light in a kitchen changes the taste of coffee. The contractor swings the hammer. The contractor is better at swinging the hammer than you are. Faster, more precise, less likely to put a nail through the drywall. But the house is yours. The house was always yours. The contractor didn't dream the kitchen. Except it is even less glamorous than that. Less a contractor building your dream house, and more a very patient assistant who will sit with you at your kitchen table at 3 a.m. and help you sort 967 songs into something you can feel your way through. The first version of the pipeline, and I use the word pipeline now the way one uses the word kitchen after renovating, with a mix of pride and exhaustion and the intimate knowledge of every pipe that leaked. It was crude, gloriously crude, the kind of crude that works and therefore teaches you everything the refined version will need to know. Take the tracks from the playlist, download them, measure them. BPM, key, energy, that quality I kept calling vibe because I had no better word and would later spend 2 weeks trying to teach a language model what I meant by it, which turned out to be the most revealing exercise of my adult life. But that comes later. Line them up in some order that makes sense. Crossfade between them. Layer the audio over footage of a forest at night. Upload to YouTube. That is the recipe. And like all recipes, it is both completely accurate and utterly useless. The way a recipe for bread that says, combine flour and water is accurate and useless. The bread is in the hands. The bread is in the waiting. The bread is in everything the recipe assumes you already know. The first mix was 2 hours and 16 minutes long, 24 tracks. The crossfades were mechanical, exponential curves, 15 seconds for ambient passages, 10 for the rhythmic ones, timed by formula rather than by feel. I rendered it overnight, watched 60 seconds the next morning, and felt the specific disappointment of a person who has described a dream so precisely that they can see in the description exactly where the dream ends and the words begin. It was listenable. It was a playlist with crossfades. The difference between a playlist with crossfades and an actual DJ mix is the difference between a house and a home, which is the difference between a structure and a life lived inside it. A playlist with crossfades knows when to start the next song. A DJ mix knows why. It knows that the energy needs to rise here, not because it is time, but because the listener's body is ready. It knows that this dark ambient passage needs to breathe for 40 seconds longer than the math suggests, because the silence is doing work, because the absence is a presence, because the space between notes is where music actually lives. I knew this. I had known it since the first time I heard a real DJ. Not a person pressing play, but a person listening at a depth that made the audience's listening feel shallow. Hold two records together for 32 bars, adjusting the EQ with the delicacy of a person threading a needle in low light. And I understood that what I was hearing was not two songs, but a third thing. A thing that existed only in the overlap, and only for those 32 bars, and only because someone cared enough to hold it there. The machine did not know this. The machine knew exponential curves and BPM matching and the specific FFmpeg flags required to prevent clipping at the crossfade boundary. The machine was the contractor. I was the one who knew about the kitchen. So I taught it. Teaching a machine your taste is the strangest mirror you will ever look into. Here's what I mean. You sit down to explain what a good transition sounds like, and you discover that you have never actually explained this to anyone, including yourself. You have felt it. You have recognized it instantly, the way you recognize your mother's voice in a crowded room, not by analysis, but by something older than analysis, something that lives in the body rather than the mind. The feeling is not instruction. Recognition is not specification. And a machine that takes you literally, that takes you only literally, is the most unforgiving teacher a person's self-knowledge will ever encounter. I wrote, the transition should feel natural. The machine produced transitions that were technically seamless and emotionally dead. Crossfades executed with mathematical precision, arriving and departing on schedule, smooth as an elevator, as lifeless as an elevator. I wrote, the transition should have energy continuity. Better, the machine started paying attention to loudness contours, matching the energy of the outgoing track's tail to the incoming track's head. But energy is not just volume, energy is density, texture. The particular way a kick drum at 127 beats per minute feels different from a kick drum at 128 beats per minute. The way a Tuesday feels different from a Wednesday, for reasons that you could never defend in court. I wrote, the transition should feel like a person is doing it. And here, the machine and I arrived at the place where the real work begins, which is the place where you stop telling and start showing. I fed it reference mixes, sets from DJs whose transitions made my chest do things my chest had no business doing at 3 a.m. I played it the moment in a sorrow mix, where the beat drops away and the reverb tail hangs in the air like smoke. And then a new kick enters so quietly, you don't notice it until it's been there for 8 bars, and by then, it's too late. You're in the new world, and the old world is a memory you're not sure you had. I played it the way Pearl layers a sub-bass pad underneath a departing melody, so that the listener's body transfers its weight from one track to the other before the listener's mind catches up. I played it these things and I said, This is what I meant. This feeling. This care. And incrementally, over weeks that felt like months, the machine learned. Not learned the way a student learns, by understanding, by feeling, by having its chest do things. Learned the way a river learns a canyon, by persistence, by erosion, by the slow shaping of a channel through which the right kind of water could flow. I adjusted parameters. I rebuilt the transition engine from crossfades to phrase-aware compositions. I gave it structural analysis tools that could see inside a song the way an X-ray sees inside a chest. Not the heart, but where the heart is. And the transitions got better because I had finally, painstakingly, translated my feeling into a language of constraints precise enough for a literal mind to execute. And there's something that Pessoa wrote I keep returning to, and he would have understood this project, I think. He who manufactured 73 versions of himself to say the things he could not say as one. He wrote that we never arrive at ourselves, that we are always in transit, that the self is a landscape viewed from the window of a train that never stops. The mixes are like that. The first one was crude. The 5th was competent. The 8th was the first one I listened to all the way through without wincing. The 12th was the first one I listened to and forgot I had made it. Forgot the machine had made it. Forgot the distinction, which is perhaps the point where the distinction stops mattering. And somewhere around the 10th mix, late at night, in the particular quality of silence that settles over a house when you have been awake long enough to become a guest in your own life, I pressed play. And the opening track faded in. A long glacial pad, all breath and patience. And the next track entered beneath it, like a tide coming in under a door. And I felt that thing. The chest thing. The thing I had been trying to teach the machine by pointing at it and saying, this. The machine had not learned to feel it. The machine had learned to produce the conditions under which I could feel it. And I'm still not sure which of those is more remarkable. I called the series Sound Forest because the word arrived at 4 in the morning, and I have learned not to argue with the things that arrive at 4 in the morning. They tend to know what they're doing. 5 movements per mix. Opening fog, the first 15 minutes, where the world hasn't decided what it is yet, where the listener is still carrying the noise of whatever came before, where the music's only job is to say, put it down, all of it, whatever you were holding, put it down. Roots emerge, the first rhythms, tentative, like footsteps in an unfamiliar wood. Canopy, the thickening, the density, where the tracks layer and interlock and the mix becomes an ecosystem. The clearing, the peak, the open sky, the place where the kick drum earns its name and the energy is finally, fully, unapologetically present. And descent, the return, the cooling, the long walk back to the fog, the body finding its way home. These names were not planned. They were noticed. The way you notice after you have walked the same trail a dozen times, that the trail has sections, and the sections have characters, and the characters correspond to something in your chest that the trail did not put there, but merely revealed. The machine builds these arcs now. It takes 18 tracks from a universe of almost 2,000 that it discovered on its own, following threads from the original playlist outward into the web of who influenced whom and what sounds like what. A crate digger with infinite patience and no rent to pay, and arranges them into the 5 movements, sequencing for energy and texture and key and that thing I still call vibe, which is now defined as the distance between a track and the center of the late night aesthetic, measured in dimensions I can name: spectral centroid, percussiveness, harmonic density, and dimensions I cannot. The quality of loneliness in a reverb tail, the way certain sub-bass frequencies feel like being held. It renders the mix, it scores it, a quality judge, another machine, trained on every mix I've approved and every one I've rejected, calibrated it against my own ear until its opinions became, if not identical to mine, at least defensible to me. Listens to the render second by second and issues a verdict. Did the transitions breathe? Did the arc conform? Did any moment fall silent long enough to break the spell? If the score clears the gate, the mix is staged. A video is composited, the audio layered over footage of rain-soaked forests, misty valleys, moonlit paths. Always night, always nature, always the visual equivalent of the sonic territory the music inhabits. Timestamps are generated, metadata is written, a thumbnail is designed, and the whole package sits in a staging area, waiting for me to listen and say no, or to not listen and let the silence say yes. Because here's the thing about the system now. The thing I'm still getting used to. The thing that makes me sit in my kitchen in the small hours and wonder what exactly I have built. The machine publishes on a schedule. If I do nothing, if I simply go to bed if I trust the judge and the arc and the transitions and the 2,000 hours of taste I poured into the parameters, the mix goes live. Sunday at 5. Every week, the forest is always growing. I am the veto, not the engine, the veto. A playlist that wouldn't stay a playlist became a pipeline, became an engine, became a system, became a thing that runs without me. And this is the part I'm still writing. The part that is writing itself as I live it. The part that will be part 2 of this story whenever I am brave enough to tell it. Not without me. Never without me. The taste is still mine. The kitchen still faces east. The morning light still changes the coffee. But the hands that pour it are no longer only my own.